Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the US Duct Advanced 3D Design with DuctQuote webinar. My name is Steve Rayburn, and I'm going to be your instructor slash demonstrator this morning. And as you guys by now probably already know, uh, our DuctQuote continues to evolve and gain new features and improvements. And this webinar series on the advanced 3D design is our way of keeping you abreast of those changes and helping you to get the most out of this amazing tool. Now, in this session, as you saw on the advertisements, we're going to be covering a few what we call errors, or we used to call this the troubleshooting session. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. We're going to try to cover in the next 20 to 30 minutes 5 of the common errors that we see folks bump into. Mostly these are folks who are new that are having these issues, but every now and then, and I'll admit, one of these even caught me last week. So the first thing we're going to have is when you see an error pop up that reads, cannot find an elbow. And this happens when you are processing one of your layouts. So I'm going to pop open an example here of where we might see something like this. And we can turn that off. And we can turn a lot of this off, actually, so it'll be easier to see. So here we have, and I'm going to zoom in on one part that's really obvious. We have what is being asked for is a heavier gauge system. Okay. So if it tells you that it cannot find the elbow, one of the very first things to do is to come over here in design and scroll down with yourself and take a look at elbow type where it has here. Okay. Now, this is the one that tripped me up last week. Your choices here are stitch welded or tubed, and this is for elbow types below 8-inch diameter, okay, for 1D and 1.5D radius. Now, if I'm asking for heavy gauge, which I was at the time, and I'm asking for stitch welded elbows, guess what? There is no such thing because you cannot stitch weld heavy gauge stuff. So the thing to do is to come in here and change that to a tubed elbow, and that'll allow you to get that heavy gauge. Now, again, that's for below 8-inch is that setting. Now, obviously, above 8 inches, you're going to be able to have gored elbows, and you can set those to be heavier gauge. All right. So that's number one. If you get that same error that it says when you're processing, you cannot find an elbow, it will give you the actual location, the section number. Now, if it's not that you're asking for a heavy gauge stitch welded elbow, look and see, do you have a mixed layout? And in fact, this is what we call a mixed layout. This particular one is a mixture of US tubing and US duct flanged duct here, okay? Now, where you run into trouble is usually in the area of branches. Now, if we were to add, say, here I've got flanged duct, and if I come in here and I want to add, let's say, an 8-inch section coming off, right? And we click and we do our usual where we're going to come out, right? All right, well, if we zoom in, we can see that this is US duct, right? And that would be found because it's all great, okay? So let's set that back down to say about 10 feet coming out. Now, what if I need this to be US tubing? Well, I simply select that section that I'm going to change, and I can change it to US tubing. Here's the problem. If you look here, this is all being asked to be US tubing because that's where the section goes in. I'm using a default group of a branch plus an elbow, in this case, 45 degrees each. And DuctQuote will not be able to find this kind of a mixed situation because I'm using the default. Now, the way that I could get this to work is I simply have to redraw it so that I can choose an exact section where the change happens so that the entire elbow is US duct or US tubing, whichever one I decide, but I would have to draw the lateral, stop, and then the elbow, stop, and then I can choose, you see? Another way, which you can see right here, is I can put a space in between, and that makes life very easy for me because this entire thing is going to be flanged, US duct flanged, and then I've put a flange adapter on the end of that US tubing, okay? So that will take care of actually the, when you process, cannot find the elbow, all right? So let's go ahead and step out of here for a sec. All right, so here's another error that we might see, and it usually comes to me like this. I asked for a Y branch, but DuctQuote gave me a double branch. Let's hop in here for a second and we can see maybe an example of what that's going to be. All right, so here we've got what I use for demos, right? We got machines out there. And let's go ahead and draw some duct out from our collector. And let's say that this is going to be 14-inch duct. Come out. All I got to do is clear that little bit there. Let's turn that around because this is going to be the inlet there, right? And then we're going to continue drawing. Let's go up to, I don't know, 10 feet ought to do. All right. So now let's say that the first thing they want to bring on board is these two machines, okay? And we've got connections on these two machines. So this is how people would usually do this. They're going to draw out with the trunk until they hit that snap point, which is where they would need to turn. And they do this, they come this way, and then they come this way, okay? And boom, they call in and they say, hey, I wanted a Y branch. DuctQuote gave me a double branch. Well, here's why. You actually drew a double branch. Now, DuctQuote works off of the center lines of the system, okay? So we have actually drawn a center line that extends past where these two laterals come off, which means this is a double branch, right? So how do we do that and not end up with something like that, okay? So we're going to get rid of all of the parts that are causing us trouble, and we're going to start again. So we're going to draw, and we're going to come out, and I am going to stop short on purpose, and I'm going to stop well short. And then I'm going to actually draw my two legs. In this case, we'll do 45-degree Y branch, okay? Now there's our Y branch. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in the first part of the trunks that will reach out to these 2 points. The reason I do that is right there. And you can see the elbow, 45-degree elbow, takes up some space. So we're going to come in and we're going to let DuctQuote correct these out to where we only have the Y branch and the 45-degree elbow, okay? Now this next part is gonna look a little odd, but I'm gonna select the Y branch and the trunk that I just drew, and then I'm gonna bring it over. Now this has to have the snap lines active, and you see the snap lines pop in and grab that. So now I know that these two sections of trunk are lined up with where I need them to go. And all I have to do is extend back and finish my trunk, okay? So now I can take this and I can size it to whatever I need it to be. Let's say that we've got two 14s and we're gonna have each of those be, say, 9s, okay? And we can still extend these out to where we need them, just like that, okay? So now we've drawn our branch. We have hit the mark, but it's a Y branch, not a double branch, okay? So that's pretty straightforward. When it gives you a double branch, it means you drew the trunk out past where those laterals would come off, okay? So here's another one that we hear. Let's close out of that. DuctQuote gave me the wrong distances, or rather, DuctQuote gave me the wrong number of pieces of duct. Now, the very first thing that you want to ask yourself when you see something that kind of sets you off and says, this doesn't look right, okay? So for instance, here we have some duct going off there and it's 12-inch, and you're expecting that to be, say, 6 feet. And you look over here and you see it's more than twice that, 12 and a half almost, okay? Here's what you need to start looking at. Did you import a floor plan? Step one. If the answer is yes, take a strong, hard look at how you handled the scaling when you imported, okay? Now, going through the steps again, you would go up to drawing, you would import a drawing, you would browse to that file, which has to be a PDF, and you would then zoom in and out so that you have it big enough that you can read and see everything you need to see on that floor plan. And then comes the critical part. You have to scale on something you know the size of in your drawing. Now, here's another thing to think about. What if what they send you is not a scale drawing? Let's say it's a hand sketch where they give you just distances that between here and here is 10 feet and between there and there is 24 feet, that kind of thing. Well, don't even import the sketch. It's just going to confuse people. Leave it as a grid and draw using those dimensions that they give you. If you need, you can drop examples of using either models or equipment of what the machine might be, okay? Now, if they did give you what is considered a scale drawing, understand many times there are details on the page where your, let's say your plan view comes in, and those details are at different scaling factors than your plan view. You've got to use scaling inside the plan view. Whatever you're importing, that's the one that has to have the scale. So what if there is no scale line? If they have drawn, let's say, some square duct or tables or anything where they give you the measurement and they've drawn it to scale, you can scale off of that. If there is no scaling whatsoever, and I have to do this all the time, get back in touch with your client and tell them you need something that gives you dimensions. Otherwise, you are guessing about the distances and therefore the amount of duct that's going to be in their quote. All right. So as we're rolling along here, our next error that we might see, and this is one that I get calls about, people are in a panic. And what they are panicked about is, let's go back to my list, okay? And notice I have, in fact, filtered my list using the ADDN, which is my abbreviation for additional, because that's what I put on the front of every one of my training or demo projects, okay? But let's change this. Instead of ADDN, let's put in something kind of simple that I've actually seen, folks, right? There's a period, and then they're looking through, and they cannot find their particular order, okay? Well, that's because if it didn't have a period in it, it wasn't going to be found because we're searching, okay? Make sure there's nothing in this search window. The safest way to do that is hit clear. That will clear it out and you'll see everything. Now also remember, you're going to only see those projects in your project list which were created under your company profile, okay? So if this is something that was done by someone else and then they call you and ask you to help them with it, the only way that they can get you to take a look at it is they must, I'm going to pop a project open, they must go to the sharing tab right here, because if it wasn't created under your company profile, if the person that wants you to help is not under your company profile, they have to come here and they have to specifically share this project with you. So I might go in and suggest that I want to see, here we go. And Adam, you happen to be at the top of the attendees list. That's why I picked you. I would have to actually add you by selecting it off of the list and then clicking add. And now this specific project, that one right there, has been shared with Adam, okay? If that is not the case, you will not be able to see it, okay? So let's take a look again. The other thing that might be happening is, and I've seen this before as well, it's an old project. I had somebody come to us that was a very old project. It was actually in the 160 range. Notice where we are now, 239, right? 247, okay? If it's a very old one, notice the default up here is it's going to show you the most recent 200 examples that meet whatever is in the search criteria, if there is anything. Well, if it's very old and your company is very active, you may have more than 200 projects. So try this, click here and ask for the most active or most current 1,000, okay? And then go looking again. If you know the actual VB number, you could type it in right there, and if it shows up, great. If it doesn't, try moving to active 1000. Now, if it's really, really old, in other words, more than 3 years, and you can see here, right, that the archive list is going to store projects that have not been modified for more than 3 years. So if you're not seeing it, switch over to the top archived 1000. Now, if you see it there and you open it, all you have to do is literally open it. Let me show you something here. I'll open this one. We'll open that. If I close now, there's no change that will be recorded. If I do that simple thing, I simply rotated it a little bit, that constitutes an update, an edit. And you'll see that it tagged it with the exact time that I did that. So all you have to do is make that simple a change to one of your archives, and DuctQuote will automatically update the status. It will no longer be archived. It will be back in the active list because you've changed it. Okay. So again, don't panic if you don't see your project, even if it's one you created. First, check the search window, make sure it's clear. Second, check to see, is it in the active 1000 instead of active 200? And finally, if it's a really old one that hasn't been worked on in at least 3 years, take a look at the archive. And you can change something there, make a simple edit, and it will move back into the active list. All right, well, we have reached the end of what we were going to cover today. I want to thank everybody for attending. We will be announcing another set of webinars for next month. And again, I'll ask you guys this, as I do many, many times. If there is something specific that you want to see covered in these advanced webinars, send me an email. You guys have it. You see it come out when I send out the invites. But let me know what it is, because I'll be happy to take a look and see about putting together something on that topic. All right. Well, again, thanks for watching and have fun drawing. Have a great rest of the week, guys.